the Busy on Business podcast. Stories of resilient small business owners persistently working smarter to reach their goals despite obstacles. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining the Busy on Business podcast. I am here today with Christina W. Obviously, we are social distancing here, but actually it's a little bit more than that. She is actually from Vancouver in British Columbia, and we are here in New Jersey. And actually, Christina has a really cool Etsy shop called Yuri Gurumi. And I actually found her because I was just kind of browsing on Instagram, looking for some Etsy shops and that kind of stuff. And I saw some of her, what would you call it? Pokemon doll knitted.
Yeah.
Does that work? Yeah. And I'm a huge Pokemon fan. So I saw some of those things on there. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I've got to reach out to her. And I checked out her Etsy shop. She's a very legitimate Etsy shop. She's over 350 sales now. And we kind of started talking, and here we are, ready to talk in this interview. So thank you so much, Christina, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
Yeah, totally. I am excited to talk about this. So especially with COVID, and, you know, we've talked previously as well about Etsy being, you know, saturated, but a lot of people are going online and looking for stuff to do. You know, and you, obviously, this is a hobby business for you, but it's something that kind of started, you know, a little more slowly, and it's grown for you recently. So let's get into that, because I think a lot of people now are, you know, being home and interested in crafts and that kind of stuff. How exactly did you get started on Etsy, or what's your journey that's kind of brought you here today?
So I started my Etsy store back in 2017 when I just finished university. So I was, I was looking for jobs, and I'd been crafting previously before that, but I just wanted to have something to do while while I was looking for jobs and putting out applications. So I made a bunch of designs, and then I just decided to put them up there and just sort of see what happened and just let the customers come. I started that way for about 2 years or so, and I did okay. Like, it was slow going, I was managing like one or two sales every 2 weeks, and for me it was like, it was just something to pay off the business, basically,
Sure.
or to pay off the hobby.
Yeah.
Like, like, if I can just have enough money to pay for yarn, then this is good. I'm happy. So that's sort of how the whole thing started.
That's really cool. So was it difficult when you were getting started? You kind of just, you know, put it up on Etsy. So for someone who's never, you know, tried to set up a shop on Etsy, did you, you know, take some pictures, just throw them up there and kind of just say, oh, well, let's see what happens?
Yeah, essentially. That was one of the hardest things, I think, when I started, was getting that product photography right. So there was just a lot of learning curve, like learning Photoshop, figuring out where to take the photos, getting the colors right, making sure that the customers can see, like, sort of what the product looks like when they don't have the opportunity to see it and feel it,
Sure.
right? So I think that was the biggest learning curve for me. And like, looking back, like, those photos were absolutely terrible. And it's something that I've had to go back and redo like multiple times.
Yeah, no,
But yeah,
for sure.
it was pretty tough. But like I said, like, I sort of started with not very high expectations, to be quite honest. So I'm just like, well, if I can get one person to buy something, like, yarn is not expensive. So if I can just buy, someone just buy something every once in a while, then, I'm going to break even, and that's great. Right.
Right.
So, yeah.
No, that's really cool. And it's funny when you kind of start something like that and don't really know what to expect. Like, you know, I had similar experience with supplements and taking photos, and our original photos were terrible. And, you know, I was photoshopping them off this like weird little black box that I just, like, literally was like a shoebox. I just found it. It's like, okay, I'll take some pictures. But then once you actually start, you know, putting some effort into that, it's amazing how much the difference is in the perception of what people see online and how they look at, you know, your business and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it's so important having photography, because like, that's what the customer sees, right? A lot of people don't even read a lot of the details and everything that you like spend so much time writing. Like, they'll just see the picture and they'll just make the decision there. And
Sure.
so it's so important. And it, like, I I was not a photographer back then.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm not even a photographer now, but but like I'm a lot better at it, at least I can say.
It's funny you say that because I being, I said I love Pokemon. I'm obviously a little bit of a nerd, and obviously, as a nerd, I am exactly that person who reads through every caption, every single thing, and tries to absorb every word. But the vast majority of people are not like that. So that's definitely can be a little bit of an adjustment for people who are, take the time into writing some of those
Yeah,
captions.
I'm the same. I'm just like, why aren't people reading? I'm like spending
Yeah,
so much time like making measurements and everything. It's like
yeah, yeah.
no one's reading that. Like I get reviews being like, it's a lot smaller than I expected. I'm like, I told you how big it is.
That's funny. That's funny. So, well, going off that, what I guess, I'm sure at first you kind of just designed some stuff that you liked and just put it out there. But how did you
Mhm.
go about kind of figuring out what to sell in your shop specifically that people, were interested in buying?
Oh yeah, so as you, oh maybe you don't know, but I did start as making Pokemon. Like
Okay.
that was what started the whole thing.
I actually didn't realize that. Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah, yeah. But then when I decided to go onto Etsy, I wasn't sure if I wanted to bring the Pokemon onto there because I didn't want my business to be contingent on another franchise,
Sure. Okay.
basically.
Okay.
So I was like, and I'm a huge animal fan as well. So you've seen that like my Etsy store is all basically animals, dogs, and those are something else that I really really love. So I just decided to go that route to start, and then kind of keep the Pokemon as my own personal thing.
Sure.
Um, yeah, and so in terms of what to sell specifically, again, it was just sort of what I like my favorite animals. I just put them on, and then over years, I sort of just listened to what the market was telling me.
Sure.
So, like, some designs that I just put on and no one bought any of them. And I realized I'm like, yeah, these probably weren't my best. Then, I take them off and then, put new things. And it's really interesting because sometimes the things that I wouldn't expect get like really blown up in terms of popularity.
Sure.
So the most popular thing in my store is actually like a little goat.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
I had no idea that that was going to be the most popular one, but it outsells everything else by like a factor of 4. I don't know
Wow.
why. Yeah,
Interesting.
so you sort of have to modify yourself as what the customers and what the market is telling you,
Sure.
right? And people, I tell people that and they're like, "Oh yeah, like have a friend that like is obsessed with goats." And I'm like, "Is this really a thing?" Like I had no idea.
Yeah.
Um
News to me.
yeah, exactly.
That's funny. So I guess basically, I mean that's really good advice for any business, I think, right? Like, even whether it's, something on Etsy or something in retail in general, or, it what really is driving at the end of the day is what your customers want and what they're looking for. And sometimes that's not always what you think in your head. It's a
Oh
really
yeah.
interesting lesson to take away there.
Yeah, definitely. Like I've made some things that I'm just like, "Oh, this is so cute. I love it. Like, this is going to sell so much." And like no one buys it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
no one cares. No one looks at it. And I'm just like, "Oh, okay."
So that's actually a good segue into my next question. So, what I guess as you've gone through this process, and something you've talked about a lot in our previous conversations too, is you know being a forever learner and constantly trying to learn, and that's kind of what has enabled your business to grow. So, are there any kind of key lessons or problems that you encountered early on that you kind of like, oh man, I wish I had known that earlier, or other kind of key lessons that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, so you mentioned that you found me on Instagram, and actually at the beginning when I started my Etsy store, I wasn't really interested in doing social media at all,
Uh
mostly because I thought it was just going to be way too much work.
huh.
Like, coming coming up with content and taking photos of it and doing my research with what hashtags to use and everything. I'm like, I'd rather spend the time doing like my actual craft and
Sure.
perfecting my designs and making new designs, and if I do that, then the work will speak for itself. And that is probably one of my biggest regrets, because like Instagram, it's a social media, like it's not just an advertising platform.
Sure.
So you really get to engage with the customers, and you really get to show your personality and the person behind what is making the products that you're buying. And I think people that want to buy handmade stuff, they want to have that experience. They want to know that they're supporting, a
The
little
personal
geeky
touch. Yeah.
Pokemon chemist fan, like, in Vancouver, rather than, just some faceless person on Etsy.
Sure.
Because, we talked about this before, but a lot of people, when they say they bought something on Etsy, they don't remember who they actually bought it from. Like
Yeah.
the store itself, they would be like, I got this necklace on Etsy, I got this, hairband on Etsy, and they don't remember who they actually bought it from, like the person, the shop name. So like, yeah, that, I think, like, learning how to do the social media, learning how to engage with the customers, and learning how to, like, even like poll, like do the stories, like, come with a polls and ask them, what should I do next,
Sure.
and all
Sure.
that. It's really important, and it's really helped me connect with the community and connect with my customers. And I think that has really, really shown itself in the Etsy views and the revenue, actually.
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So what would you say has been your biggest learning device? Is it kind of trial and error, or looking at other Etsy shops, or did you kind of realize, hey, I'm building the Etsy brand almost as like a creator, one of many, but what like kind of drew you to those conclusions in that learning?
Oh, I just sort of Googled or YouTube, like, hey, like, starting a handmade business, like, where should I start?
Sure. Okay.
And yeah, and just there's so many resources out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if you just Google or YouTube, like, starting my Etsy business, things I've learned in the past 7 years, like that, it's all over the place, and like, that's very valuable advice a lot of these people are having,
Sure.
or giving. So, and also, like, when I say, connecting with your followers on Instagram, also looking at other people that are doing the same thing as you, that are, quite successful. They've got, like, 60,000 followers, like, looking at what they've been doing, what hashtags they're using, how they're engaging with their followers, and just taking hints from them, because, it's clearly working. So,
Sure.
so
No, that
yeah,
makes sense. What
yeah.
about, you mentioned 60,000 followers and that kind of stuff, especially when you're newer, maybe you don't have any followers, right?
Hmm.
Um, do you think that you're at a major disadvantage from that, or do you focus more on, quality of followers as opposed to quantity of followers?
Yeah, yeah. So that is one of the, Instagram 101 lessons I learned at the very beginning, which was the number of followers that you have is not, I mean, like, it's important, but it's not the most important
Sure.
thing. Like, at beginning, I just focused on, like, how do I get more followers? How do I get, like, how can I convince people to follow me? But, getting people who actually are engaged in your stuff, like, that is even more valuable, I think. People that are willing to share your work and tell their friends about it. I think that's even more valuable. Um, yeah.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And honestly, another person we had on the show said the exact same thing, and I've kind of noticed that myself from personal experience. That one cheerleader, if you will, they tell a friend who tells a friend who tells a friend. That works a lot better than just like a statistic that's not actually even engaging with you. And on Instagram in
Mhm.
particular, they value the more proportion of users that are engaging with you versus kind of just blindly following you. So
Yeah,
that,
exactly. And it,
yeah,
it takes a while to get those, engaged followers. And I think
sure.
it's, you got to be patient. I think that's another, big lesson I've taken out from, being on the Instagram scene, is to try and stick with it, be patient, and, you know, yeah, just keep with it, because it's so easy to feel like you're just screaming out into the void, and and no one is listening to you, and the internet's a really big place, and I can imagine it gets really discouraging.
Sure.
um, but I've got my own regrets about starting earlier and trying to build that following, but, you know past is in the past, and just try and,
Yeah. All
move
you,
on.
yeah, all you can do is continue to learn and continue to make adjustments. And, I think
Mhm.
that persistence and that patience has obviously paid off for you. I mean, in the past, I think you said 3 or 4 years ago you started it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, and then now in the past year or so is when you've started to really see like much more like, oh wow, this is a little bit more traction, you know. So
Hmm.
it that's like literally a perfect example for how it pays off. The more patient and persistent and willing to adapt and learn you are. So that makes sense for
Exactly,
sure.
exactly. And I think that those skills apply all over, basically in every single field. So, I'm really glad that I decided to, to take this journey, because I think it's going to really help me with my, my other career prospects as well.
Sure. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Did you learn anything, you know, obviously you're a chemist, so it's a little bit out of the typical business realm. So did you learn anything, you know, kind of like customer service or pricing or any of those kinds of things that are a little more typically in the business side of field as you were kind of going through growing your business?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of, well, customer service, I used to work in customer service,
Oh,
so
okay, there you go.
just being just being nice. But in terms of pricing, that I think was a pretty big learning journey for me, because the handmade market is, I think a lot with Amazon and
Sure,
a lot of big box players. I think people don't value handmade work, and um, like for pricing basically. So I'm charging like 35-40 dollars for a little toy that's maybe like 3 inches tall.
sure.
And a lot of times I get people who are messaging me saying this is too much, and I'm like, well, it takes me a certain amount of hours to make this, and I make it by hand, like. And at first, like, I didn't really know how to respond to that, but now I'm just like, well, too bad. Like, I'm really sorry you feel that way, but this is my price. Um, it's just sort of having more confidence in my own pricing and my own skills,
Sure,
rather than before. I think I might have underpriced myself a little, because, and like, I I just wanted people to buy something so that I could have yarn money, right?
right.
So, like, I'd be like, oh, no one's gonna pay if I charge this much. Like, I'm gonna lower my price a little bit. But I think I've learned to value more like my own skills, rather than just just only focusing on what like the customer wants, because obviously you do want to focus on what the customer wants, but sometimes customers will just, they want whatever's cheapest
Sure.
basically, and that's not the right market, right? That's not the right customer in the handmade market.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and it's all about the people you're trying to attract, and not just valuing, you know, your product and yourself, but your time too. You know, like
Hmm.
it's you have a quality customer who's willing to pay. Chances are they know other quality customers who are going to pay that kind of stuff too. And plus, you know, for you, if when you know, looking at the end of the day, what you want to be doing is your hobby and your passion and that kind of stuff, you'll have more time to actually do that as opposed to maybe pandering to some customers who are, you know, not the ideal customer for you and you're basically just breaking even for what or losing money for what, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, like that's sort of something I'm being really careful of, is trying not to to hate my hobby.
Right.
I don't want to trying to be pandering to everybody, where I'm just crocheting all day long, just trying to get the orders done and making no money off of it, and no time to design, no time to do anything that I actually like, and basically just hating everything.
Sure. No, for
Yeah.
sure. So actually speaking of that, that reminded me, so you've adapted your product portfolio over time, if you will, and have, you know, there's other stuff and like there's some digital stuff, there's some keychains. Um, talk about that and how your portfolio of products has evolved over time.
Yeah, so I think one of the most valuable things that I decided to do for the business was diversify. Um, so at the beginning, I sort of had like the full size, like 2-3 inch toys that I made, and that was all I really had for the first 2 years or so. And
Yeah.
then I started thinking like, okay, I need to, like, maybe I should start expanding and trying to reach other customers, reach other markets. So the keychains came next. So they
Hmm.
were like, a sort of smaller thing. I could have it at a lower price point. It's a little more utilitarian.
Sure,
It's
sure.
not just a toy. You can, put it on your backpack and stuff. And then after that, I decided to go more into the pattern writing, because a lot of people people who are willing to buy crochet items, they probably don't know how to crochet. If
Sure.
you know how to crochet, you're probably less likely to pay the big money for someone else to make it for you when you can make it yourself.
Sure.
So then I decided to start writing up some of the designs and the patterns for some of my more popular items and just put them up and see how they do. And they actually did pretty well. Like they're doing okay. The pattern market is pretty saturated, but
Mhm.
just covering all those bases has also really helped in terms of getting the traffic and the ball rolling and the views. So yeah, I think it was really important to
That makes
do that.
perfect sense. Yeah. Plus
Yeah.
for the patterns, that's just, you did it once, that's just free yarn money from there, So
Yeah, exactly. And it all comes back to the yarn money,
right,
basically.
right, exactly.
And yeah, and another thing I forgot to mention was also diversifying in terms of paid and free content. So
Okay.
for the patterns, I have some patterns on my store that are paid, but I also have some free patterns for some of the more simple things that I
Okay.
have on like a separate blog. And that's another thing that's starting to help drive traffic and build up basic, get more eyes seeing, like looking at the business as a whole,
Sure.
right? Yeah.
So where would you say now that you've kind of been doing this for a few years? You mentioned adding products, you mentioned driving traffic, which like you're kind of building a funnel, right? So there's some
Mhm.
people doing free stuff on Instagram and on the blog, and then hopefully some maybe lower end paid stuff or higher end paid stuff.
Mhm.
And obviously taking pictures, and then there's doing the fun stuff, which is the crocheting itself. So
Yeah.
where do you spend most of your time these days?
Um, I think I still spend most of my time physically crocheting.
Okay.
Um, and that's really what I like to do. So
Sure,
I
sure.
think I like keeping it that way. Because as much as I like to design, there's definitely some days where I want to watch Netflix and just crochet. Like it's
Sure,
very therapeutic for me.
sure.
And I think that's why, a lot of other crochet sellers will just do the patterns. They just want to design, they put the patterns out, and then people buy the patterns, and they don't need to worry about taking the time to make physical things.
Mhm.
But that's what I actually like to do.
Right.
So yeah, I would say I spend most of my time doing that. It's relaxing, and I want to make sure that this hobby and this business still makes me happy.
Sure,
So
sure. No,
yeah,
it's a slippery slope once you start kinda going all over the place there. Uh,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, but that's really cool, and I think, you're fortunate that you found something that is, therapeutic and, your happy place that is actually something that can give you more yarn money or some, extra spending cash or that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like but aside from all that, it's a learning experience. I've really grown as a person and in terms of my skill set by doing all these things, and
Sure.
so I'm thankful for that as well. And if anyone who's listening is on the fence about doing something like that, like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, I think, like, I never imagined, I think back, in 2017 when I was making that Etsy store at the beginning, that I'd be at this point now. Like,
Sure.
I'd be writing patterns, I'd be, on Instagram, I'd be doing all these things, and made the friends that I've made, um, stuff like that. I just started it. I imagined it just being like, I've got this stuff on Etsy, it's on the internet somewhere, floating around. Maybe someone will bump into it and give me $40. So, something like that. So yeah, so I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out.
No, you should be really proud. It's really cool. And I think that what you just said is a great point too. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is you learned a lot and maybe no one was interested. Obviously, it became a lot more than that for you. But, you know, I think if people are on the fence about doing that, that's just like, what's the worst that can happen?
Hmm.
So I think
Yeah,
that's a good way to look at it for sure.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, that was pretty good conclusion advice. I was going to ask you for some kind of conclusion. That was pretty good. But is there anything else you kind of want to say, or for people who may not be as confident in themselves initially, or any other advice for people who are, trying to get started on Etsy, or things you've learned on your journey over the past few years?
Yeah, so I think the big takeaways for me is, make sure you're still doing what what you love.
Mm.
If you're going to have a hobby business, like it's different if you're trying to make a living wage off of
Sure,
it.
sure.
But yeah, be patient. It took me 2 months or so to get that first sale, on Etsy. And it's also like, I don't have a whole lot of followers on Instagram, but it's taken me like quite a lot, maybe like half a year or so to get to where I am right now. So yeah, just keep at it, and just remember to stay creative and
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
bring yourself back to what made you happy and why you're doing it in the first place. I think that's something that I often have to ask myself that,
Sure,
like, before I decide to take on any project, being like, why am I doing this?
sure.
Is this making me happy?
No, that makes
Or
perfect
at least
sense.
if it's not making me happy, am I learning something from it?
Sure, sure. Yeah, learning to value your time in that sense, whether it's learning experience or yarn money or real money or whatever you want
Yeah,
to call it,
exactly.
you know. Um, but especially, it's cool that you found something that's therapeutic and you were able to turn into this kind of sense too. I always like
Mhm.
playing guitar. That's therapeutic for me, but I'm just nowhere near good at it to turn it into anything that good.
Maybe one day for you,
Yeah,
Vince.
maybe someday. Highly unlikely, but guitars are a little more expensive than yarn too, so it'd be a little harder
That's
for me to
true.
get guitar money. But cool. So one, let me just see here. I just want to make sure I'm spelling this. If you want to follow Christina on Instagram, her shop is Yuri Gurumi. So on Instagram, that's YuriGurumi, and you can find her there on Etsy as well. She's got some really, really cute animals, amazing Pokemon, of course, as I mentioned at the beginning as well. So definitely check her out. Thank you so much for joining us. This was really, really insightful. I enjoyed speaking to you a lot.
Oh, thanks
Um,
so much.
yeah, no, it was awesome. So great conversation. Thanks a lot for joining us, and hopefully we'll talk again soon. Here in our key takeaway section, I'm going to share a couple really key, crucial points and takeaways that I thought would be great for you guys to take as a learning experience from everything that Christina shared. And she shared a ton of great stuff, so I'll try to get this in quickly. Persistence was the first one. She started the store 3 or 4 years ago. So whether Etsy or anything else, it takes a lot of time. I think she said it took her 2 months to get her first sale online, and now she's doing a lot more. So persistence is key. If you don't see success initially, honestly, no matter what you're doing, it's kind of normal. You just got to get over that. And another thing that she did, which has helped to accelerate her growth, is learn and adapt. One thing I really loved that she said is that she's constantly trying to learn and adapt and figure out what's right, figure out what she should be doing next, figure out what other people are interested in. And that goes not only for how you're running your business and the products you're producing and that kind of stuff, but for also how you're understanding your customers. We've talked about this a lot lately, but listening to your customers, listening to the demand that's in the market, and then changing to address it. She talked about different products like the stencils or even the keychains and how she added different price points and that kind of stuff. By listening to the demand that was out there and having a little bit of data and some research that she did herself, she was able to adjust and continue to grow in her product offerings. Another really interesting point that Christina brought up is that Etsy kind of builds its own brand more than it builds your brand, because people think, oh, I bought that on Etsy and not on your shop necessarily. Obviously, Etsy is still a great platform, but it's something to definitely keep in mind, understand, and adapt your business to help grow your brand. So whether through the blog that she's doing or social media and that kind of stuff, or additionally, I've seen some Etsy stores do some really cool packaging and include a special handwritten note. Any little things like that you can do to add to that personal touch, that handmade feel, the one-on-one connection there to the shop will help to build your brand. And going off of that, she also did a great job of building a funnel, which is common in any business. Any business out there is involving some sort of funnel. Funnel meaning you got some free stuff on top, maybe some, stuff that's a little more involved, maybe paid, maybe not paid, then get into some lightly paid stuff, and then get into the higher paid stuff at the bottom. And of course, the lower you go down the funnel, the less people are there. But you want to include some of that free stuff up top to attract those people, to pull them down through the funnel to get ultimately some paying and higher paying customers. So by offering free designs on her blog, some other things of that nature to teach people how to crochet and that kind of stuff, she's able to attract more of a following. And again, when it comes to this kind of stuff, quality over quantity, which leads me to my next point that she brought up, which comes to pricing. Pricing is extremely, extremely, extremely difficult if you've never thought about it or done it before. And from personal experience, from Christina's experience, from almost everyone I've talked to who's an entrepreneur or started their own business, pricing is one of the toughest hurdles to get over at first, because you're so excited and you're out there and you want to get some sales and you want to do this and you want to do that, and all of a sudden someone goes to you, that's too expensive, I'm not paying you that. And all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, what do? I really want to make this sale and I really want to start being successful and kind of be on my way, but like, I really don't think it's worth the price they're asking for, but okay, I'll do it because I really need it, you know? Sorry, that was a little bit good acting there, but it's difficult at first. And we've all been there. We all make those kinds of concessions and that kind of stuff. But truly getting to a point where you're valuing the time and the service and the product or whatever it is you're providing, especially from a quality perspective, 10 quality customers will beat 100 crappy customers any day. So really make sure, I know it's difficult to do it at first, but you're focusing on that. 10 quality customers will attract 10 more quality customers, and you'll constantly be dealing with problems and pains from those other 100 not so quality customers. So that's definitely something important to keep in mind as well. The last point that I want to mention that Christina brought up that I thought was awesome is, what's the worst that can happen? That comes up for a lot of us, especially in the creative industries, but also in just business in general. When you're starting something, there's a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. Growth comes from being in those uncertain zones and uncertain situations. That's where you'll learn. And honestly, what's the worst thing that can happen? Whether it's a hobby-related business like Christina, where she's making some extra money for yarn and maybe some other stuff, and she's learned a ton of great business skills that she can apply to her full-time job, or if you're trying to go to do something else and maybe it doesn't work out, but you take that skill to another job or another new business, you're always going to learn something, but you're never going to have those learnings and those experiences unless you just kind of take the plunge and jump out there and start doing it and kind of just figure it out as you go. Thank you again for watching this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any comments, let us know below. And special thank you as well to Joe from Waking Creative for helping to produce this episode as always.